He didn't just stand up there and give little discourses, and neither do I. Well, it's about time. You still have to confess that meth, confess that meth, confess that meth. Get up. You still have to confess that meth, confess that meth. COVID-19 is a curse. Oh, I'm so sick. Oh, God, I'm so sick. I bet I got COVID. Oh, God, I'm so sick. Well, it's about time. COVID-19 has had it. Glory to God, I don't have it. I don't have it. I never will have it. Will have it. And I don't mind telling you, I'll never be sick again. You still have to confess that meth. Confess that meth. Confess that meth. Get up. You still have to confess that meth. Confess that meth. The devil hates it when believers get money. Most especially preachers. I did it. Yeah, I did it. Don't ever do it. Don't ever do it. In the middle of all this, I will continue to receive a bunch of money. Just wait till Inside Edition finds out I have a Gulfstream fund. I did it. Yes, I did. You still have to confess that meth. Confess that meth. Confess that meth. Get up. You still have to confess that meth. Confess that meth. I'll be your daddy. No wonder there was so much power released. You still have to confess that meth. Confess that meth. Confess that meth. Get up. You still have to confess that meth. Confess that meth.
You don't hear them talking about COVID. To be specific, COVID-19. That name gets further and further away from China as opposed to calling it the Chinese virus. Come flu, the Chinese virus. Come flu, the Chinese virus. Don't you understand, you dumb son of a bitch? Calling it come flu, the Chinese virus. Testing is a double-edged sword. They test and they test. People don't know what's going on. We got this, they got this. You do testing, you're gonna find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down. You know what? We got another one over here. The young man's 10 years old. He's got the sniffles. That's a case. That's a case. Thank you, China. Send us the play. Come flu, the Chinese virus. Come flu, the Chinese virus. Don't you understand, you dumb son of a bitch? Calling it come flu, the Chinese virus. Despite the fact that I have done a phenomenal job. He lied. I saved hundreds of thousands of lives. There was only one person that died. I ran for politics once, then I became president. You are so lucky I'm president. There's a limit to what we can achieve. I stand before you today to declare, come flu, the Chinese virus. Come flu, the Chinese virus. Don't you understand, you dumb son of a bitch? Calling it come flu, the Chinese virus. If I lose an election over that, you know what? This country's in big trouble. Big trouble.
Just open your mouth and let it say whatever it wants to say. Ora dili, namakute, temanese, goropo umala la jegle disto. La goropo atilo masamaha. Ora dili, namakute, temanese, goropo umala la jegle disto. La goropo atilo masamaha. Oh, nakane, hey, oh, wala hanada. Bakala ba jegle? I just pray that Ești cum vă stac, zaci că Ruchać de buraka Morga dele, namakute, temanese, goropo umala la jegle disto. La goropo atilo masamaha. Morga dele, namakute, temanese. Goropo umala la jegle disto. La goropo atilo masamaha.
morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to the Vanguard. For Spike, Childish Gambino Cohen, I am Matt Wright, and together we are traversing the muddied waters of freedom.
Gambino?
And look, I am running out. I only know so many rappers, and I am dredging the bottom of the barrel to keep coming up with new ones.
When are you going to call me Rick Rothstein?
Next week.
Okay. All right, good. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to the Muddy Waters of Freedom. Matt, how was your week?
My week was fantastic.
That's great.
I watched the new Paul Hogan movie, which I didn't know Paul Hogan still made movies.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that either. Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was not good, but it was Paul Hogan, so I watched every second of it.
Well, that's awesome. I wish I could still watch movies. I flew to Chicago, did some stuff there. We'll talk about it in the towards the end. We'll do a campaign update on everything. But basically, I flew around all week. Actually, even before last week, for over a week, and I'm back for tonight and tomorrow, and then I'm flying out again to Pennsylvania. But we'll talk more about that later. First and foremost, allow me to thank Kasey Nether Campbell for the Kava that I am drinking on today's episode. Kid Judy. That would be a good one. Here, add that. And allow me to thank, someone put that in the comments, and allow me to thank Kroger. He's Kid Cudi. He's a rapper. Nah. The problem is we put a very, very white person. Yeah, Kid Cudi.
I always thought it was Kid Cudi.
No, it's Kid Cudi. And allow me to thank Kroger for this delicious, purified drinking water that I drink now. Bulavanaka.
Before we get into all the other stuff, real quick, I want to say last week I was very frazzled and I forgot to do this, but we need to give a very special shout out to Billy Mayer. I don't know how to say your last name, man, and I apologize, because he did the intro music for last week, and he sent it to us, and he asked if we would one time play it as an intro music, and I told him yes, because we love fan submissions and we will always play. Well, we'll usually play them depending on what they are. And so shout out to Billy for that song. I think it was called The Fourth, and thank you for submitting it to us.
Yeah, thank you, Billy. Thank you for your submission, and thank you for we will use it in the future. I didn't use it this time because we were so behind that I didn't have time to enter it into the streaming software, but we will definitely use it in the future. So thank you so much for that. And so this episode, of course, is brought to you by the Libertarian Dad Bod Calendar, featuring some of the sexiest libertarian men to ever be both libertarian and assigned male at the same time, and including yours truly there, Mr. April, the sweet summer boy, Spike Cohen himself. This is a great social distancing tool. If you want to have people stay 6 feet or more away from you, just wave one of these bad boys around. LibertarianDadBod.com. All proceeds go to help various libertarian campaigns and the Libertarian Party in general. LibertarianDadBod.com. It's only $12, including shipping, and for $30, including shipping, I'll sign it for you. This episode is also brought to you by the Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus, the fastest growing waffle caucus in the Libertarian Party. Actually, the fastest growing caucus in the Libertarian Party. Update on that as well later on. This episode is also brought to you by Black Coffee, spelled BLVCK, because why the hell not? Black organic coffee, organic cold brewed coffee, the way that Mother Nature always intended. Go to blackbrews.com to get yours today and use checkout code MW to get free shipping on your black coffee. This episode is also brought to you by the Jorgensen Cohen campaign. Jorgensen Cohen campaign. You can get your signs today, your Jorgensen Cohen signs, just like that, by going to joe20.com. You can also join our team. You can make a donation, and you can get one of these signs. Jorgensen Cohen. This episode is also brought to you by Chris Reynolds, personal injury attorney. Chris Reynolds, attorney at law, who would like you to know that he loves you very much and wants to represent you for your personal injury case in Florida if you ever have such a thing.
If you have a personal injury case in Florida,
In
Chris
Florida.
Reynolds is the man to call.
He is the man to call. Chris Reynolds Law.com. Matt?
Superfan Sarah Anderegg says that the black coffee is, I want to make sure I quote her correctly. She says, that's good coffee. And,
Did you need to double check that quote?
Well, I wasn't sure if she said great or good. Because I would have called it great. I would have called it great coffee personally, but Superfan Sarah Anderegg calls it good.
Superfan Sarah Superfan Anderegg.
Sarah Superfan Anderegg.
Well, good. I'm glad to know that. Yeah, black coffee, black brew, blvckbrews.com. So speaking of, we don't have a thing. Oh yeah, we do have a thing actually. Now is the time for our segment. Speaking of Black Brews Coffee, now is the time for the Black Brews Cold Brewed Caffeinated Rapid Fire segment, brought to you by blackbrews.com. Again, use code MW to get free shipping today. We start with the top of the story, which is about a man who was a libertarian, but he was much more than that. He was also an activist. He was an evangelist for the message of liberty. He was someone who was trying to bridge divides between people of different groups and ethnicities and demographics and backgrounds to rally around a cause of setting people free in our time. He was also a devoted fiance and a family man and someone who died fighting to protect others. His name is Garrett Foster, and he leaves behind a loving fiance who misses him very much, named Whitney, and also the family who misses him. Garrett was at a protest in Austin, Texas last week when a driver, and we want to be clear, we don't know if the driver did this intentionally or if it was accidental, but a driver during a protest, a driver ran a red light and turned into protesters who were legally and safely crossing the street. He almost hit those protesters. Garrett was nearby. He got his fiance out of harm's way, approached the driver's vehicle, and the driver shot him 5 times, killing him, and then sped off. There was a lot of misinformation when this first came out. There were people who said that Garrett fired his rifle first because there were there was the sound of 5 gunshots followed by 3 gunshots. So some people thought Garrett fired first and then the driver fired. The driver fired first and then some other person, I think a medic, someone who was in the crowd, fired at the driver as he was speeding away. Garrett never fired his weapon. This has been confirmed by all of the witnesses as well as the police. There was also then some misinformation that Garrett had pointed his rifle at the driver. He did not do any such thing. He had it at low ready, so basically he had it like this. It was pointed almost at his feet. So he was not pointing it at anyone. And then finally, there was some misinformation. People who believed that the driver had been swarmed by protesters and he was just so frightened as a result of that. He drove into protesters, and they understandably were very upset and started pounding on his hood because he almost killed them. Again, we are not going to try to say whether this was intentional or not. We don't know, at least as of the last time I checked. We don't know whether this was intentional or not, that he did that, but he did do that, and Garrett died trying to protect protesters and those around him. He was a libertarian. He was a great supporter of the movement for liberty, and he will be missed. He will certainly be missed by us. There's not a good way to segue from that. There's no good way to segue from that other than to say, go ahead.
Real quick before you go into that, to Brett Robertson. I also use the coffee club that you mentioned. I'm not going to say their name because they aren't our sponsors. And but I love getting their coffee every month. I look forward to that day every year. And to Ryan, I haven't tried your grilled cheese yet, but trust me, it's on my list of grilled cheeses to try. And if anybody doesn't know what that is, if you send us a message, you're going to get an auto response that says, we aren't here to take your message, but leave us your best grilled cheese sandwich. And to the people that do, I usually try them.
Yeah, I can't because I'm on a very strict autoimmune diet and I'm not allowed to eat dairy or most grains. But if you come up with a gluten-free vegan, God, I hate saying that. If you come up with a not cheese, not dairy, not
dairy
just don't
dairy substitute cheese.
If you don't want to, just don't just leave me out of it. Just leave me out of it. It's fine. I don't even care. Whatever. So moving on to other news that we will make fun of, because we certainly will not make fun of Garrett, but we will make fun of these people. Joe Biden made an appearance on a podcast from his basement, as he is wont to do.
As he has been doing
in the form of his campaign, and he was asked about how he felt about nurses. Now, this should be just a layup question. There's no reason for this to have been
I'm still betting he thought this was a layup question. He gave the layup answer. In his mind, he gave the layup answer.
Here's what he had to say.
And I had a nurse at nurses at Walter Reed Hospital who would bend down and whisper in my ear.
Wow.
And go home and get me pillows. They would make sure they'd actually, probably nothing ever taught in, you can't do it in the COVID time, but they'd actually breathe in my nostrils to make me move, to get me moving.
What?
I want to know what she's whispering in his ear.
To get him moving.
Well, no, she's whispering in the ear, and then she went home and got him pillows. Like, did she not want to use the hospital pillows? Were these pillows so that when she's smothered?
But then they'd be her pillows.
No, that's true. They would be her pillows. Or her husband's.
I'm going to have to listen to that again, because I believe that it's possible that I'm just not comprehending what he's saying. I'm going to try one more time. Let's try this just one more time.
And I had a nurse at nurses at Walter Reed Hospital who would bend down and whisper in my ear.
Wow.
And go home and get me pillows. They would make sure they'd actually, probably nothing ever taught in, you can't do it in the COVID time, but they'd actually breathe in my nostrils to make me move, to get me moving.
What I really like about that
I don't.
What I really like about the second part is he was actually right on the right train of thought initially. He was like, where he said, I would have nurses that would, well, it's probably not taught. Well, you can't do it in the COVID times. They would breathe into my nostrils. You're right. That is not taught unless you are an infant.
No one.
And you are giving CPR to an infant.
No one is teaching that.
No, nobody is teaching that.
That if a grown
you were
man.
Correct there.
That is definitely, they don't teach that in school. And there's many reasons for that. Definitely. Now, he was correct. You don't do that in the time of COVID. Where he trailed off there is that you should really just never do that.
Yeah, and Brandy Carter in the comments says to get him moving. Right. Like, I don't remember why he was in Walter Reed. I probably should have looked that up, but I figured that was funny enough on its own that I didn't want to damper
by trying
to find out what it was.
Suss out why he was even, yeah. I am not sure how to process that. I don't know. Anyway. So not to be outdone by his opponent that might as well be his running mate because their policies are basically the same, just branded slightly differently. Donald Trump sent out a campaign email last week advertising commemorative coins featuring pictures of him and former President Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
Pictured there in this super high quality photo.
And I have to apologize about how poor that photo looks, but that is the one that was in the email that I received.
So it was actually a super low quality photo in the actual email.
In the actual email.
Okay.
So I had to see it so everybody else got to see it.
There we go. Now we all had to watch this. So,
right.
But then the Reagan Foundation, I'm being told, isn't happy about that. Is that correct, Matt?
No, they have asked the RNC and the Trump campaign to not use the former president's likeness in the campaign. And Reagan Foundation Chief Marketing Officer Melissa Giller said in a statement, "We own the likeness of President Reagan, and they used his image for the coin without our consent. We called the RNC and asked them to cease and desist the use of President Reagan on the coin, and they agreed." When the president that you try to associate yourself with the most had his foundation say, "Don't use my image. Please stop."
Republican president's foundation told a Republican president.
Please just
Can we
not
do that?
let's act like we're different parties.
Let's not do that. So speaking of gold,
sure.
Gold has hit a record high this week, with the value of it soaring to $19.43 an ounce, beating out the previous record of $19.23 an ounce in September of 2011. And why is just a mystery.
September of 2011 was the end of the worst quarter since the beginning of the financial crisis. Everybody was very certain that the dollar was going to collapse at any moment. And people started buying up all of the gold, causing prices to skyrocket.
Right.
And now, wait, that can't be right. Trump tells me the economy is doing great, job numbers are great. That can't be right.
This is not.
The exorbitant government spending and printing of money causing a devaluation of the dollar and potential collapse of the financial arena in America.
Okay, but why is the price of gold going up, though?
Because it still has value.
Oh.
Yeah. Because
it's not that gold is any more valuable. It's that the money is worth less and less.
Right. And gold is more valuable because, you are correct.
I'm still chalking this up to one of those things that the world may never know why.
The world may never know.
The world will probably never know why the price of gold is going up at such a time.
And it is expected that gold will hit $2,000 an ounce by the end of September. $2,000 an ounce. Yeah. 2,000
buckaroos. Now, thankfully, the Republican Party is they're going to be introducing fiscal responsibility any minute now, right, Matt?
Any second now.
Any second now.
Any second, we're going to be seeing fiscal responsibility from the Republicans, who also rolled out the HEALS Act today, the Health Economic Assistance Liability Protection and Schools Act.
Well, that sounds good. That sounds like something that's going to be fiscally conservative and help reduce the cost of government, or at least reduce the increase in the cost of government. Is that correct?
You would think so. Yeah, you would think that something along those lines would be going on. But their proposal costs roughly $1 trillion, or this is the way I like to look at this, if paid off at $1 a second, 31,710 years.
Oh, wow. That doesn't sound terribly fiscally conservative.
Thankfully,
the Democrats are so outraged by that they are proposing massive reductions in government spending to try to get things under heel and stop the rampant overspending in government that is leading to the massive soaring increase in the cost of living. Is that correct?
That would make sense. That would make a lot more sense than what's actually happening, because the Democrat proposal is $3 trillion or 95,130 years at the $1 a second model.
Oh gosh. So basically this is an argument over how fast we want to sink the ship.
Right. Yeah.
Good. So the proposal was outlined on Monday afternoon by Senate Majority Leader Cocaine Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, who we are trying to get rid of with our friend Brad Barron, hashtag ditch Mitch, hashtag add Brad. This proposal would give unemployed workers an additional $200 a week on top of whatever benefits they receive through their state level programs. They propose. Go ahead.
As opposed to the $600 a week that people are getting right now.
Right.
The Senate Democrats are attempting to keep the $600 a week benefits in place through March 2021 if the economy does not improve.
Okay.
Which I'm willing to bet if you keep the $600 a week through March of 2021 going, the economy will not improve.
Yeah, because that's more money than most of them would make working.
Right.
So they.
Right. And that's on top of that $600 on top of what they're getting from their states.
Yeah.
So like the CARES Act did in April, the HEALS Act calls for sending $1,200 direct payments to American households. So, of course, this means that they don't have a lot of extra stuff in it to give to other businesses.
Right, because as we know last time, all that money just went directly to Americans because they spent roughly $15,000 or $16,000, around $16,000 per American, and they each got $1,200.
Right.
I wonder where the rest of that money went.
Yeah, because it didn't go to the people who gave them that money.
Paid for it with interest. Yeah.
Yep. The CARES Act would also provide another infusion of, I'm not going to say that word, I'm going to call that taxpayer-funded
money. Yeah.
Yeah, taxpayer-funded money to provide loans to small businesses that keep employees on payroll during the crisis. Now, however, they did put a stipulation in this one. You have to have less than 300 employees.
Well, I guess that's somewhat of an improvement because last time most of the stimulus money, it went to small businesses that were just affiliates of much larger businesses with thousands or tens of thousands or in some cases hundreds of thousands of employees, but they were individually claiming them as small businesses.
If you want to talk about a very small step in the right direction, that was the smallest step you could.
This would be a sniff in the correct direction.
Right.
It also includes.
It was a glance.
Here's a sniff in the not right direction. The bill also includes legal liability protection for businesses and hospitals to protect them from lawsuits if customers or patients contract COVID, unless the business is guilty of gross misconduct or willful ignorance. This is exactly how you would stop the spread of COVID. If you simply allowed businesses and organizations to be held liable if there is a spread of COVID at their business, it would lead businesses to self-regulate in ways that are going to be much more effective than the government imposing a top-down, one-size-fits-all solution across the entire country. And yet, here we have them doing the opposite of that in a massive shock to no one. Ever.
Another thing that won't come as a massive shock to anybody is the bill will include an amped up tax break intended to encourage Americans to eat out at restaurants. Let me rephrase that. That would encourage people who are still working to eat out at restaurants because according to Tim Scott from South Carolina.
I knew this. I knew this was going to be a Tim Scott special because of all the restaurants here. There we go.
The bill included a 100% business meal deduction, which was up from 50%. And Mr. Scott, Tim, says that with limited indoor dining, we can keep folks safe. It will lead to more orders, translate to more take-home pay, and more revenues for millions of small businesses.
So this, I guess, is a step in the right direction because libertarians, Joe and I, propose 100% deduction for everything. Ever. You don't pay, the government shouldn't be taxing you in the first place. So I guess business meal deductions are good. It's something that they're letting you not have to pay taxes on. So I guess that's good. Now, thankfully, the bill also includes $105 billion to help schools safely reopen. It's not clear on whether the payments will be made available only to schools that decide to reopen, which means that it is a lie.
Right. So if a school decides not to fully reopen, they may not be able to receive any of this money, which means that no money is actually going to be spent.
Right. Or it's just given to all the schools, which means it was just $105 billion given to schools, which is something like double what they usually get. And of course, as we know, in the 50 plus years, or roughly 50 years, almost 50 years that the federal government has been involved in education at the federal level, things have gotten way better. And by way better, I mean that they've spent almost $2 trillion and literacy rates have gone down.
Yeah. The test scores all across the board
Have gone down. Yeah.
Stagnated to gone down, depending on which one. Some of them have stayed pretty level, but most of them have gone down while spending continues to go.
Now, thankfully, the average age...
audio listeners who can't see my hand motions.
Up and down, respectively. And then also, thankfully, it has $30 billion.
What Republican bill wouldn't have this?
Yeah, $30 billion for the military-industrial complex. Sure. $686 million for new F-35s, which are one of the most proven ways to fight COVID-19 by killing people so that they cannot get COVID-19.
That's right. And F-35s definitely help people pay bills.
Yes, they help people pay bills, and they're all about healing. I think it's good that this is called the HEALS Act, since it gives nearly $1 billion for fighter jets.
30 billion to the military.
$30 billion to the military.
With 3/4, we can round that to 3/4.
But what, three quarters of a milli for the nearly $1 trillion F-35 program. I'm certain that will fix it.
Now, remember, this was just introduced, though. So what we are looking at is the Democrats have a $3 trillion proposal. The Republicans have a $1 trillion proposal. Neither one of those two numbers is what it's going to be.
No.
If I'm a betting man, it's going to be closer to the 3.
Or more. Usually the way that Democrat and Republican negotiations work is Republicans say, I want to spend X. And the Democrats say, I want to spend X times 3. And the Republicans say, you anti-American loser, hater and loser, and commie, that's way too much. That's socialism. Our X is free market capitalism. And the Democrats go, you fascist Nazi, 3 times what you want is good, but just what you want is not good. And then for some reason, they end up spending X4.
Yeah. Right. X. It's X plus X times 3.
X times. Yeah, it's X4.
Sure.
Why would I say?
Yeah. No, that's X4.
I'm not good at algebra, Matt.
I'm not either. I think we said the exact same thing.
X plus X3 is literally it's 1X plus 3 X's.
Right. It's X4.
It's X4.
Right.
That's what they do. So that's fantastic news.
That's fantastic news. So we're going to be probably covering that. But remember that they're only going to be in session till like August 4th, I think, before they get another break after that really hard 2 weeks at work.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I can't imagine having to be a federal legislator and work for days at a time and then get to not work for way longer.
And real quick, not all Republicans, I didn't put this in the notes I meant to, not all Republicans are backing this.
Okay.
I've also come up with a new nickname for this guy. Famed Libertarian Rand Paul, because his L is so small, it's not even there.
Oh, he's like a microscopic L libertarian?
Yeah, so he's just an Libertarian at this point.
Libertarian, I like it. Ron Paul Light.
Ron Paul Light. He walked out of a meeting with the GOP about this, and he said, why would we even talk about more deficit spending? And to that, I say kudos. Nice job, Rand.
And if for whatever reason his vote is needed for it to pass,
he'll vote.
Guess what he's going to do?
He's going to vote.
what he has to. There's one person in Congress who has routinely said no to the Republicans, and he's now a libertarian because they forced him out. Because if you want to be a Republican or a Democrat, you can pound your chest on your pet issues or beliefs or your philosophy all day long. When push comes to shove, if your vote is needed, you will vote for it.
Vote for it.
Or
I will give Massey. Massey will. He's about 90% good.
He does a lot of good. He's also in Congress where he very often doesn't have to vote for it, where his vote's not needed. There may come a moment where Thomas Massey has to decide whether he wants to be a Republican or whether he wants to stick with his principles. I was not happy to hear some of his comments about police brutality earlier this year. I was assured that, this was a couple months ago, I was assured that he was just doing that so he'd win his primary, which makes him a Republican.
Yeah.
So anyway, we have some really good news, is that now it is time for the personal injury attorney, Chris Reynolds, attorney at law, anchor call-in moment, which is brought to you by personal injury attorney, Chris Reynolds, attorney at law. This is where you, our beloved, amazing viewers, can literally go to anchor.fm/muddiedwaters and ask us questions by leaving a message on the old answering machine that's on Anchor. And you can leave a message and we will answer it right here. You can also make a donation, which want to give us money? But you don't have to. If you don't want to give us money, we'll be sad, but you are free to always leave your messages and we will answer them. We have one today, and then we also have an emailed question.
Yeah, somebody did email in a question.
Do you want to do the email first or the...
Sure.
Okay. So here was whichever. So here was the question. It doesn't really matter, but here was the question by email from Brad. It says, in talking to my friends about the libertarian ballot, I've come across an argument that I don't know how to defend. What is Joe's and the party's response to government regulation of business? I'm thinking here about occupational safety and health admin, Food and Drug Administration, Environmental Protection Agency, etc. My friends and I agree on the spirit of those organizations. Society benefits from efforts and even requirements on industry to help us work, eat, and live safer. Simply aligning the market is one thing, but then isn't there room for Ford Motors to just decide it's cheaper to settle Pinto crash lawsuits than recall the problem? Didn't we establish OSHA out of an effort to make working in America safer? I've read ideas about creating private certifying organizations, but doesn't that just put us back in the same boat? That's a fantastic question, Brad.
That's a great question.
That is a really good question, and it's one.
I will say that real quick before you answer that question. Most of the questions that I get by email are not good questions. Most of those go immediately into the not good question folder. I am deleting this entire thread because what are you on asking that? Because that's not even any. But that was a
good one.
Well-written email.
Yeah.
So thank you, Brad. Thank you.
Thank you for a good email, Brad. And folks, you too can send a not terrible email to muddiedwatersoffreedom muddywatersoffreedom@gmail.com. Please just leave a good one. Because we get some.
I read every one of them. And some of the stuff that has been said to me, not knowing it's me, of course, that comes through, it makes me weep.
You're hurting Matt.
Weep.
Stop hurting my co-host and heterosexual life partner, please. Please. Hashtag stop hurting Matt. Please. So, Brad, this is a fantastic question. It speaks to a lot of concerns that even some libertarians have, which is if government is not regulating things, then how will the market be able to provide? We have to look at the fact that these were originally created from market demand. The market demanded that changes be made, and changes started being made when labor unions were first organizing. It was to collectivize and grow and solidify and unify the organizing and bargaining power of labor to be able to agitate for better conditions. And eventually the government realized that this was something they could get on for themselves. So they created these agencies that were supposedly set up to protect us. But we see what they've done. All of these agencies, health and safety and environmental and everything else, they serve some roles. And here are what those roles are. They create legislation, they create regulations, which they both create legislation and executive regulations, agency-based regulations that largely make it impossible for small and medium businesses to compete. They make it increasingly difficult and sometimes impossible for smaller, more disruptive and innovative and dynamic companies to compete because they can't afford the initial cost of compliance to be able to even grow in the first place. These regulations just so happen to be written by crony lobbyists who make their way into these agencies that are crony lobbyists for the big companies who, coincidentally enough, happen to have a vested interest in smaller competitors not being able to rise up and threaten their market share. So that's one thing they do. The next thing they do is that when the large companies inevitably abuse those regulations, so if we're talking environmental, they leak, they spill, they dump, they do whatever to harm the environment, or if we're talking health and safety, they infringe upon the health and safety concerns of their workers, they get protected against lawsuits. They get indemnified against actual lawsuits, or they get shuttled into these federally run class actions that often give little money to the actual workers and give most of it to the attorneys and the government. Yay, government. And then the other thing they do is they externalize the cost of cleanup and damage to you, the taxpayer, who often were also the one who was hurt by the thing that happened. So that's what happens when you put powerful people in charge of protecting you against their friends, the powerful people who bought and paid for them to be in office. So your secondary question, how does the free market handle it? It's very simple. If you get government out of it and you allow for a truly undisrupted, uncoercive free market, when a company is a bad actor, not only will they be ripped to shreds by various lawsuits and actions against them, but also by removing those barriers and burdens that are put in place to stop their smaller competitors to rising up, their smaller competitors will rise up. People will say, I don't want to buy Pintos that explode. I want to buy this new car that doesn't explode. Yay, cars that don't explode. And then they will say, I don't want to buy cereal from this company that uses slave labor to pound their oats or whatever. I want to buy cereal from this other company that treats their employees well. Yay, not slavery flakes. So this is how the market fixes it. Yes, private certification agencies also have a role as well. If there is a private organization that says in order for you to have our official good cornflakes or cars that don't blow up mark of approval, you have to demonstrate these various things, and we will come in and you have to pay a fee for us to demonstrate that you're complying. And then people will see that mark and go, hey, this is one of those cars that doesn't blow up because it's been approved by the National Association of People Who Make Cars That Don't Blow Up. And or hey, these cornflakes aren't made by chattel slaves because this came from the international consortium of people who don't make slaves pound their oats, and so or the cornflakes or whatever. And so that's how you can do that. Is it perfect? No system is perfect. Does it remove the cronyism? Yeah. because it puts you in charge. It takes the power and the wealth out of the hands and the decision-making out of the hands of the craven pandering politicians, the bureaucratic state they've created, which is funneled by the bureaucratic, by the well-heeled, politically connected billionaire cronies that have bought and paid for them to be in office, and it puts that power and that wealth and that decision-making ability back in your hand as the consumer, where it always should have belonged. So that is the answer to that. And it was a great question.
It was a great question. Real quick, I want to pull it back up. I'm just pulling it up on my phone here, where he said,
"Damn slavery flakes took our gerbs." That's correct.
Where did he say it?
Not slavery flakes. Breakfast of champions. These comments.
Oh yeah,
are just...
yeah. Isn't there room for Ford Motors to just decide it's cheaper to settle Pinto crash lawsuits than recall the problem? Yeah. So here's the thing. That's what they do now. They figure out what the cost of lawsuits would be averaged out, and then they figure out what the cost of a recall is.
And when the government indemnifies them against damage, that cost of lawsuits goes down. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. The cost of recall, if the cost of recall is higher than the cost of the lawsuits, they will go with the lawsuits. They already do this. This isn't new. This isn't something that would happen if. This is already happening. And what Spike said about the guy.
Go ahead.
What Spike said about the government indemnifying them is also correct. So a lot of the problems that you think are going to happen if we get rid of these things are already going on.
Exactly. Often when people say, but without government, who would protect us against the things that are happening right now with government supposedly protecting us against them? And these things are said often without a tremendous amount of irony. Then that's okay.
Exactly.
That's okay. We still love them, but that is what's happening. So the bottom line is that, and also we focus on the lawsuits. There's also just the fact that when you remove all of those barriers and burdens, there can be more actors in that sector. You can have more providers. So again, it's not just I can sue them when my Pinto explodes. It's I'm going to go buy, instead of a Pinto, I'm going to buy a Lima. Bean. I'm gonna go buy a non-explodey car from the non-explodey car corp.
I'm gonna go buy a refried.
A refried. Ooh, actually, now I'm hungry. I'm gonna go buy a Great Northern White, which doesn't explode. I'm getting punchy. I'm gonna go buy a car that doesn't explode. And there are many more cars that are being provided, and so many of them don't explode now because the government isn't protecting the splody car makers. So that's really how that works. Is it perfect? No. Will there never be cars that don't explode, or never be cars that explode again? No, that's not how any of this works. But will it greatly reduce the amount of abuse that's happening by taking the power out of the hands of the powerful and putting it back in your hands where it belonged, decentralizing things at the community level? Absolutely. Yeah, no, it absolutely will.
And Daniel McCarthy has a great point. Vaping was an unregulated Wild West, and God, those were good times. Those were beautiful, beautiful times for people who vape. And they removed diacetyl on their own, which is true. They did. Like the vaping industry as a whole was like, well, how do we make this safer than cigarettes? How do we make this the healthier alternative? I'm not saying it's healthy, but
it's healthier. It's better than lung cancer.
I can swim 2 miles straight without too much of an issue right now. And you guys see how much I vape. This isn't just on the show. This is all the time.
Yeah. I have to deal with this man when he doesn't have his vape.
Yeah.
And it is unfortunate. And it happens very quickly and
like
unsettlingly.
What was what Charlie Brown's friend, Linus? The one that always had the blanket?
Yes.
Yeah, this is my blanket.
Another good example would be crack.
That's also a great example.
But we'll go with blanket. This thing that I smoke or else I lose my mind is like a blanket.
It is. It makes me feel all warm inside.
Or crack. That does that too. Crack also makes you... So, speaking of... We definitely don't smoke crack anymore. So here is we do have a call-in question, so we're going to take that.
We got 2 more while we were doing
Wow.
this. Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, these are all, oh, wow. I like the short questions because they scare me.
Yeah. The long
So
ones is.
the long
Those,
ones usually aren't as scary. The short ones are kind of
I get
scary.
worried about the long. I don't get worried about the long ones. The short ones, I'm like, he may just come on here and say something really inappropriate.
Well, let's all find out together, folks. So here's the first one from Jorge Mendoza.
Would libertarian deregulation allow for child labor laws to become null and void and allow for child labor abuse? Thanks for answering my question.
Thank you for that, Jorge. So, I mean, first of all, we don't have a prioritization of getting rid of child labor laws. What I will say is this. Child labor is a reaction to the realities that are created by the government and its well-heeled, powerful cronies in countries that still allow it. What happens is when people are put into a position that is so low and into a situation of generational poverty as a result of their power and their wealth being taken from them, they now have to resort to things like child labor and even child slavery, where they literally sell or lease their children off to do some of the most backbreaking work that often kills them because they will all starve if they don't. Removing those barriers and burdens and control that is happening at the top from those well-heeled political cronies, and instead, deregulating decentralizing the market and giving the power back to the consumer and the power back to the people, and ending the theft from them of their power and their wealth and their opportunities. We're not going to be talking about child labor anymore. We're going to be talking about wealthy children because they've already had great amounts of wealth bequeathed to them by their ever growing prosperous families and communities. So that won't be the same issue as it is now. Here's what we have right now: is this sort of arbitrarily defined age when you can't work at all. Unless you're doing it for your family, and then it's okay. But if it's for someone else, you can't. And so, for example, when I wanted to do some stuff like bussing tables and things like that during the summer to have some extra money in my pocket, it was my choice that I wanted to. I couldn't legally do it until I was 14. Or no, 15. 14 or 15? I think 15.
In Virginia, it was 15 with a permit, 16 without.
I think it was 15. And so some may have just worked illegally at those ages. Not me. But some may have done that. And some may have said, I'm going to do it anyway and work under the table, because why should the government tell me that I can't choose to go bust tables if I want to have some extra money in my pocket? Some might do that for 2 summers.
Like, I had a lawn mowing business growing up when I was like 12, 13, and 14. Mm-hmm. And then I hated waking up early on Saturdays, and I stopped doing lawn mowing.
Yeah,
business.
that's
yeah. But like, I was well under the legal age to work, and I had my own business and I was running it, and nobody ever came to say anything to me about it. There was never an issue. Same thing. People, kids, I don't think they do this anymore. I'm not 100% sure because I don't see papers that much anymore, but kids used to have paper routes. And this was only 20 years ago.
Not that long ago. Yeah. It was like 20, 25, 30 years ago. Yeah.
So their laws on child labor laws are dependent on state and kind of picky and choosy on what they are allowed to do.
What they're allowing to do. Child labor laws are ruining this country.
Right.
So we're going to go with these next 2 questions. And
real quick, to Katie Wright. One, that is my sister's name, so I will never forget this conversation. And 2, yes, this is the smock or smoke, however you want to pronounce it, Nord. I love this thing. It's like a roll of quarters in your hand at all times.
Or fantastic. Crack.
But you can crack. You don't get that good. You don't get that good support.
Sure.
You kind of get the opposite.
Well, it's hot.
Right.
it's like really
And-
hot, so you try not to hold it more than you have to, I'm told.
Right. It's true. And the glass breaks and
I've been told that as well.
right.
By the way, Matt and I are both recovering drug addicts, so yeah.
Yeah, we are.
So okay, cool. So now we have these two.
Her dad's name is Matt Wright.
This is insanity.
This is insane.
What is even happening on this show anymore? I don't. Are you sure that's not your sister or your daughter? Is this how old, Katie? How old are you? Let me go look at Katie's profile.
Yeah, take a look at Katie's profile. Let me know how old Katie is.
This could be your
Because
daughter.
That would be really weird because I don't know I have one.
Matt, Katie could be your daughter. I think Katie is your daughter.
Katie is not my daughter.
She kind of looks like you. I'm pretty sure this is your daughter, Katie.
She's 22. Mathematically, that doesn't make sense.
I mean, it's not impossible.
No, literally, that's impossible.
That's your daughter. So while you guys make up and reunite, I'm going to I just cannot wait to play these because they're like the short ones that I haven't had a chance to listen to yet. So here we go, folks.
Some of the stuff that has been said.
Spike, have you shown Vermin your bag of shekels?
There we go. I don't show anyone my bag of shekels, if it even exists. No one.
The bag of shekels.
No one sees that. And first of all, how dare you? And we don't. I'm not even acknowledging that I have it. So no. All right, here's this next one, which I hope is just equally. Here we go.
Spike, how is Alexander Hamilton the absolute worst founding father, and how is he responsible for the modern baking schemes?
It's not a loaded question at all.
That is not
So, Josh, I think, so the worst, certainly not a good one. But I will say that, Hamilton et al. were the people that, felt that the Articles of Confederation did not allow the government to be centralized enough. And he and others pushed to illegally replace the old Articles of Confederation there with the Constitution, because the Articles of Confederation said that everything had to have a unanimous approval. They instead went with a supermajority, which was illegal. The Anti-Federalist. Go ahead.
He also went to speak to King George behind the back of George Washington, technically committing treason at that point.
Oh.
Spent a lifetime torturing and what we would now call bullying Aaron Burr. So when Aaron Burr had already lost his wife, his kids, and his grandkids, and he shot him, I get it. And he created the first centralized bank, which is how he became the Secretary of the Treasury. So yeah, no, he was awful.
He was awful.
He was awful.
Awful.
And yet I find it odd that the reason he never became president was because of an affair.
We're a moral nation, Matt.
Back then, possibly more are possibly
Ish,
able to argue,
kind
minus
of.
that whole slavery thing and the murder of indigenous
and
people.
raping slaves thing,
Right.
genocide. But do not cheat on your wife.
Don't cheat on your wife. Alexander Hamilton also he also grew up poor, but his wife didn't, and their family had a lot of slaves. Like Thomas Jefferson did not have that many slaves.
Eat your heart out, TJ.
And he never released them, even though he said we need to release the slaves. He never released his. He never did any of that. treated his wife terribly. Aaron Burr actually loved his wife very much throughout their courtship, and Alexander Hamilton is awful. Like I've seen the show, the play, the movie, whatever you want to call it, and then it's good, but they portray him to be much better of a person than he actually was. He was awful. He was awful.
Some say that he laid the groundwork for a small government that would inevitably grow into the monster that we have today. A Chia government, if you will.
Right. Yes.
A Chia government.
A Chia government.
Holy crap, it just keeps on a-growing. Hamilton. So that is the end of the personal injury attorney, Chris Reynolds, attorney at law, anchor call-in moment. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in with your questions. Speaking of... Hey, do you hate Democrats? Well, I've got a new reason. I've got a new reason to hate them even more. I hope you do. I sure do. So, weed. Speaking of things that grow,
sure,
weed grows. So it has to, because it's a weed.
I don't know if anybody knows this. It's 2020. Did everybody know that it's 2020?
It's literally 20 years after 2000.
It is literally 20 years after 2000.
It is the current year.
And according to Pew Research, back in 2010 was the first time that Americans polled more than 50% that weed should be legalized.
That was 10 years ago.
That was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That was 10 years ago. And now it's hovering right around 70. 67 is, I think, where it's at right now, but 67 to 70.
Yes.
So one, intelligent people would presume that the party that promotes themselves as the party of criminal justice reform would have jumped on the chance to make marijuana legalization part of their platform.
Since that would be like a major thing to do in light of the fact that marijuana being illegal is a gateway to the prison pipeline that leaves so many people in prison for essentially the rest of their lives.
And according to Joe Biden, last November, marijuana is a gateway drug.
Joe Biden pictured here being on weed.
And I had a nurse nurses at Walter Reed Hospital who would bend down and whisper in my ear.
You cannot tell me that weed is not involved in this.
They would make sure they'd actually, probably nothing ever taught in, you can't do it in the COVID time, but they'd actually breathe in my nostrils to make me move, to get me moving.
So, two things here. One, some kind of drug is involved in that statement. Two, don't breathe into people's nostrils. Ever.
Yeah, don't do that.
COVID-19 should not have been the moment for you to stop doing that.
Right. No, I'm not going to say that. No. I'm not going to release that much about myself to people.
Yeah, I definitely, please. I don't even know what you were going to say, but don't. But now on Monday, speaking of things that should have never been said, on Monday, the Democratic National Committee rejected an amendment to put a plank supporting marijuana legalization into the party's platform. This wasn't just like legislation to actually do it. This was just a plank in their platform calling for not an end to the war on drugs, just the legalization of weed.
Yep. Now,
weed.
Now, oddly, the vote came in
of weed.
Came in at 50 to 106. Or, as some quick-minded people may have seen already or figured out really quickly, exactly the opposite contrast to how it polls in the country. 67%.
60-something percent, yeah.
Yeah, 67% of the people say, yeah, it should be legalized. I can't do the math on that really quickly, but it's roughly 67%.
60-something.
No, we're not putting that on our platform.
Yeah, of Democrats. This is 2020. This is the year where the authoritarian Republican President Donald Trump is in office, who has said in the past that he's even okay with it being legalized. And yet,
go ahead.
to
Jordan on YouTube, just because he says she, I don't know, I apologize. Jordan says, I hate this argument. Just because you make it legal doesn't mean an employer will hire you using it even for recreational purposes. And no, they shouldn't have to.
Yeah. And by the way, the reason it doesn't mean that, but it actually kind of does. And here's why, Jordan. The reason they're saying that you can't use weed is because they don't want to be legally liable for what happens that would not even have anything to do with you being on weed. But if you are on weed, it will be blamed for it. The government, the state and federal governments will blame it on that. And now you can be held liable in court much more easily because it wasn't just an employee doing something wrong. It was an employee on drugs doing something wrong. So no. Getting rid of those regulations doesn't instantly end that, but it ends the reason they're doing it in the first place. Companies aren't saying, man, I don't want my employees on weed because weed's bad. They're doing it because they're protecting themselves from liability. That's why they're drug testing. So you get rid of the liability from the fact that it's illegal, and yeah, it kind of does get rid of that.
Right. So 50 to 106. 50 said yes, let's put this as the plank. 106 said no, we don't want legalized weed. Now,
weed, not the war on drugs, not ending the war on drugs, which is what we should actually be talking about. Weed. Nearly 3/4 of Americans recognize that there's no reason for weed to be illegal.
Yeah.
This is the equivalent of Joe Biden being asked about nurses and saying something about how he gets up and a moving when people breathe into his nostrils. They were given a perfect opportunity. No, it really is if you think about it. Because just like that. Because if they were given a perfect opportunity to say, hey, we're the party of legal weed, and instead they said, no, we're overwhelmingly not the party of legal weed, meaning that there's only one party of legal weed, and that's Joe and me. That's Joe and me are the only ones at the federal level pushing for legal weed.
The platform will retain language that Democratic nominee and former Vice President Joe Biden. Yeah, okay. I was reading that wrong. The platform will retain language that the Democratic nominee and former Vice President Joe Biden hammered out with criminal justice task force that included some Bernie supporters, some of the Bernie brethren. That's in the new plank of the platform says overlay. Says Democrats will decriminalize marijuana and use and reschedule it through executive action on the federal level. We will support legislation of medical marijuana and believe states should be able to make up their own decisions about recreational use. The Justice Department should not launch federal prosecutions of conduct that is legal at the state level. All past criminal convictions for cannabis use should be automatically expunged. Now, reading that, it's like, that doesn't sound so bad. But let's take a look at the Justice Department should not launch federal prosecutions of conduct that is legal at the state level.
Uh-oh.
So for roughly the last 3.5 years or so, we have heard that the executive branch, that the presidency, has too much power over the Department of Justice. Are you now saying that the executive branch, that the president is going to be telling the Department of Justice, you can't go after these people? Because all you're doing is decriminalizing it. You are not making it legal. That means they can still go after them.
That means that they are openly calling for the president to ignore the law as they see fit,
Right.
which has lots of precedent there. But why not just get rid of the law? If you're already blue sky thinking on this thing, why wouldn't you just say, get rid of the law? And then that way there's no question about whether it'll get enforced or not. Well, thankfully, folks, there's a campaign out there that's saying just that. Get rid of the laws. And in the meantime, we won't enforce them at the federal level, but we also want to actually get rid of the laws so that you don't even have to face them in the first place. And that is the Jorgensen-Cohen platform.
And just because you reschedule something to a different schedule act, I don't remember what it's called. Just because you reschedule it doesn't mean that it is now perfectly fine to use. Schedule 5 means 21 and up. Schedule 4 is where the prescription. I used to know all of these because they were trying to ban things that I cared about.
Right.
And just because it's been switched, right now weed is a Schedule 1, which is on par with, I think meth.
It's higher than heroin.
It's higher than heroin. I think meth, LSD, and weed are like Schedule 1.
Yeah.
Meth, LSD, and weed. I think those are the Schedule 1s.
It means you can't even legally research it for medicinal purposes at the federal level.
Right.
Like you can with heroin.
Right. Which is the Schedule 2.
Right.
Right. So just because it's been rescheduled doesn't mean that all of a sudden it's going to be a free-for-all, everybody gets to go out and get stoned. It means that should the Justice Department decide to go after you, they can and they will. Just because they said the Justice Department shouldn't do it doesn't mean that the Justice Department isn't going to do it. And on the state and local levels, marijuana offenses still account for 40% of drug-related arrests, and most of those aren't for dealing or trafficking, but they are for possession. And as somebody who's been arrested for possession, that was a load of just pure that was garbage.
It was garbage.
Garbage.
Load of garbage.
Pure
Excuse
garbage.
my French. And this is about raising revenue, folks. It's about two things. It's about raising revenue and criminalizing you. Now you got a record. Now they can go after you for other stuff. Now they can tell you, you can't do this, you can't do that because you got a record. And if you do it, now they can put you in jail for doing that thing while you had a record, even though it would have been fine if you hadn't had a record. It's about criminalizing you as soon as possible so that they can do whatever they want with you. So they can put you in prison and use you as a chattel slave for free prison labor to the benefit of multi-billion-dollar for-profit prison labor contractors that make so much money that they are traded on the stock market. And we know from the, I forget his name, but the architect of the war on drugs under Richard Nixon, he said this had nothing to do with making Americans safer or healthier or fighting addiction. It was about criminalizing hippies and blacks and Mexicans, as he put it. That's all it was about. Yeah, that's how he put it. He said you can't arrest people for being hippies or black or Mexican, but you can go after their drug of choice.
Mexican?
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
I figured he would have used different words.
Well, that's the version I read. Maybe it was slightly different, but yeah, it was about going after people they wanted to go after who didn't vote Republican and who were against the things that Nixon and really the Republicans and Democrats were doing on a daily basis. We certainly can't blame the Republican Party for this because, as we just talked about at the beginning of this thing, 50 years later, here come the Democrats to overwhelmingly vote to keep it illegal. Just in case you thought they were even remotely serious about criminal justice reform. They're not. So Biden, after all these years, is still resistant to full marijuana legalization. So better than Trump? Not on this.
And again, yeah, right. And again, last year he said it was a gateway drug, like in November. I don't remember the exact time, but it was somewhere around November. And they said, hey,
gateway drug.
You need to tone that back.
Yeah.
And then he switched it this year to, I'd like, maybe I'll look at decriminalization, because I knew people back in Delaware, and then he went on a long rambling story about Delaware.
Yeah.
People smoke weed. He may have done that.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up.
Let me tell you about Corn Pop.
Let me tell you about Corn Pop.
Old friend Corn
was
Pop.
a bad dude.
Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Corn Pop was a bad dude.
But this is 2019. The Democratic nominee for president says that marijuana is a gateway drug, which, by the way, is nonsense. The person who first coined the term gateway drug, who was with the DEA, came up with it out of thin air while being asked about it during a press conference. There is no science about gateway drugs. It is all garbage. He was asked why marijuana should be, he or she was, I forget if it was a man or a woman, was asked why it should be illegal when it was less harmful than alcohol. And so they just made up the term, it's a gateway to worse drugs. There's no study showing that. Do you know what is a gateway to worse drugs? The black market, making drugs illegal. You know why? Because if you're going to get arrested and go to prison for selling drugs, you might as well do it for the ones that make you more money.
Yeah, because as a person who has never sold weed ever, you don't make a lot of money doing it.
Ever.
We've
never.
Ever.
We would never.
And like decriminalization, yes, that is an improvement. It is an improvement. But it still leaves in place the system for unequal enforcement.
Right.
And that is a big thing. And as we all know, as everybody who watches our show regularly knows, black people are more likely to be arrested or punished for marijuana possession than white people in states where marijuana has only been decriminalized.
So it actually makes it more unequal.
It actually makes it more unequal.
Because it's already unequal. Black people are more likely to be arrested for marijuana use and distribution than white people, even though white people are actually slightly more likely to use and distribute marijuana, in a similar way that black people are many times more likely to be in jail on a gun charge, even though white people are considerably more likely to own firearms, because gun control is also racist. But that's another subject. With decriminalization, it actually makes it even more lopsided, because now you put the discretion in the hands of police officers who have demonstrated disproportionate racial bias. Guess what happens? So, if the Democrats want to actually show that they are for criminal justice reform, they would make their candidates say that legalization needs to happen and show how it would help black communities. Instead, he says...
And I had a nurse nurses at Walter Reed Hospital who would bend down and whisper in my ear.
Wow.
And go home and get me pillows. They would make sure they'd actually, probably nothing ever taught in, you can't do it in the COVID time, but they'd actually breathe in my nostrils to make me move, to get me moving.
I just realized someone was... Who's saying wow during that?
So it's the host of the podcast that he's on is saying wow.
Can you imagine your job being to hear something like that and try to pretend that that's important or it isn't?
So this is the way that I envision it, is instead of her going, wow, like that is so touching, I'm going, I think she's saying, wow, this is the dumbest thing I have ever.
I gotta hear. Let me hear the wow.
And I had a nurse at nurses at Walter Reed Hospital who would bend down and whisper in my ear.
Wow.
And go.
That is, you're right. It's someone going, oh my gosh.
Right, because he just said,
I
had a nurse or nurses at Walter Reed Hospital who would bend down and whisper in my ear. Wow. You... What? What?
So, good news. We don't have to live this way. If we choose...
Brianna, I don't know how to say her last name, on Facebook says, it's Owen Wilson. Wow.
Oh, it might have been Owen Wilson.
Wow.
And so they were just responding like they always do. So fantastic news, folks. You don't have to actually vote for Republicans or Democrats. You could vote for
That
Jared
really
Jorgensen in my...
silences you.
What?
That is like a silencer, a suppressor, if you will.
Oh, can you not hear me well?
Like you can, but it really cuts you down.
Does this sound better?
No.
Oh, God. How about this? Well, now you can't see it. Folks, the good news is that the good news... Damn it. You can vote for us. And so we had a really great time this week. I flew out to beautiful Chicago, Illinois, and hung out in Chicago and Springfield and Peoria. Had a great time there. And we submitted all of our paperwork to be on the ballot in Illinois. I gave a stump speech, or actually all of us gave stump speeches during a press conference where we blasted the Republicans and Democrats. And then we went to, I had an interview, many interviews, but I had a live TV studio interview in Peoria, had a meet and greet there, did stuff in East Dundee, got interviewed by John Cass, one of the most influential reporters in Illinois, in the Great Lakes region, and then I went to, then after that I flew to beautiful Columbus, Ohio, to take part in the Libertarian Party of Ohio's national convention. Had a great time at their meet and greet. Gave a rousing keynote speech there. It's 45 minutes long, so we're not going to play it now, but we are getting the audio and video of that, so we will be putting that up very soon. But something really cool happened during the convention. We found out that there was a Black Lives Matter protest happening in Columbus at the State House. Columbus is the capital of Missouri. And I thought, well, that's where we need to be. So I went to my libertarian friends there at LP Ohio and said, hey, guess where we need to be? Not here. Let's go to the protest. So a bunch of us went to the protest, and I got to meet with some of the organizers that were there. I'm pictured there looking like really confused, but I was talking with the protesters and organizers of the protest there. They shared their concerns, told me about what they were advocating for, and I told them, after I listened to what they had to say and what their concerns were, I then told them about what our policies were, what the Libertarian Party was proposing, what Joe and I were proposing in terms of criminal justice reform, ending the war on drugs, ending these policies that are systematically enforced against communities of color, disproportionately higher than other communities, and based on that, they gave me their endorsement right then. They endorsed Joe and I, and they also endorsed the entire Libertarian Party. And they have since been going on... now, keep in mind, this is the local group. It's not the entire Black Lives Matter organization. But it's a start, and they endorsed our campaign and the entire party, and have been very vocal in promoting it ever since. We then, while we were there, we met with some Boogaloo boys, some CNN boys, who were well armed, and they were there to basically...
You just made it so the entire show gets taken down.
CNN, this is CNN. Met with some CNN folks who were armed and who were there to basically stand between the protesters and those who would tear gas them. And because that has happened in the past there in Columbus.
Noticing a Free the People shirt behind, like...
Yes.
Yeah.
From Matt Kibbe. Yeah. Don't hurt people.
I have that shirt.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. And so we had some CNN boys of all different colors who were there, and who were there to protect the protesters against anyone who might try to, tear gas them or pepper spray them. That had happened before there at the Capitol steps. Didn't happen this time, oddly enough.
Weird.
Really, it's just weird. Weird.
It's just...
And then we went...
I wonder why.
Then we went to the Waffle House, because I am the chair of the Waffle House caucus. There's one of my newest supporters there on the back right who works at Waffle House. There's a lot happening in this photo.
There's a lot going on in this.
There's a
photo.
lot of stuff happening in this photo. I am the only sober person in this photo. I believe including that employee.
Probably.
I believe including that employee. So we had a great time. Then we flew back yesterday, and now I'm home. And on Thursday, I will be flying to beautiful Pennsylvania. And when you say where in Pennsylvania, yes, I'm going through all of Pennsylvania. All of it. West, central, and east. All the way on through. And we're going there. Joe and I are actually both going there. We're attending a series of mini rallies across the state to help boost turnout for our efforts to get ourselves and the rest of the libertarian slate on the ballot in Pennsylvania. Then we will be taking our tour bus. We got a tour bus. Taking our tour bus to beautiful Annapolis, Maryland, where we will be submitting our Maryland ballot paperwork. And then we'll be having some kind of celebration there. And then I will be back home next week on Tuesday.
To Johnny Garrett, which one? Which book of mine are you reading right now?
Oh wow.
I'm very curious on which one you are reading. Because
we'd like to know what
I want to know which one you went with.
Which one are you reading?
Which one are you reading?
So
and do you like it?
Yeah, do you like it? So I'm going to go pass out now because I have been doing a lot of interviews and I have to repack all the stuff I just unpacked to go to fly again. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds like
it's fun. A lot of fun. I love what I'm doing. I'm more alive than I've ever been. I love meeting with libertarians and setting them on fire for liberty and setting them, getting them excited about the ability that we have and the opportunity that we have to use empathetic and dynamic and engaging messaging to reach people where they are, to go into their spaces from their precepts, validate their concerns, and reflect to them how our common sense libertarian policies are the way to fix those problems, as I did at the Black Lives Matter rally. And there's nothing special about me. Well, I guess
he's reading Matt Gibby's book. He's not reading my book.
Oh.
Yeah, that's so disappointing.
You should read one of Matt Wright's books.
I mean, they have nothing to do with politics, but you should definitely read them.
Just read them anyway.
Yeah, read them anyway.
Just read them anyway. So I'm, I love doing that. I love, getting libertarians excited about spreading the word as happy warriors for liberty, fighting for a world set free in our time. And I love meeting with people who've never heard of libertarianism and see the light bulb moments they have when they realize that they finally found their political home. It's why I started this campaign, not just to get us elected into office and to get other libertarians elected into office, but also to spread the message of liberty, to grow the movement and the party so that we can be free, so that we can elect libertarians and dismantle these systems that the Republicans and Democrats have created. So I'm very excited about that. And so I
will say that out of all the libertarian candidates that I have seen / worked for / supported, you do the most outreach outside of the party. Most libertarian candidates that I see, they come to an area and they talk to libertarian party affiliates, or they go to the conventions and they talk to them there. And that's kind of it. It's like they're just trying to become a celebrity in a small pond, is the best way that I've always kind of put it, where you are actually trying to advance the message and get out there to people who have never heard the message.
And what I'm also doing is I am going into libertarian spaces and encouraging them to join us in doing that. That's where the real action is. That's how we win elections. That's how we change the cultural conversation. Go to where they are. They don't have to agree with property rights yet for us to talk to them. They don't have to agree with self-ownership. They don't have to agree with non-aggression. They don't have to, pledge to the NAP. They don't have to read Rothbard. They don't have to do any of that. We can go to where they are. We aren't in control right now. And because we aren't in control, we aren't in a position to tell people what they have to do before we listen to them. We need to go, nor is that a good way of evangelizing a message. You go to people where they are, you bring them in, and then from there, you share the message with them. But you got to make that connection first. So I'm very excited to do that. I love doing it. I do certainly get tired at times because I'm doing a lot, but I am on fire every single day. I feel more alive than I've ever felt before. And it is so exciting to see the light bulb moments happen with people finding out about libertarians, and the light bulb moment with libertarians where they realize we can win, we can succeed, we can change the conversation. It's just a matter of how we do that, how we move forward on that. The best way to reach people, and it's very exciting to do that, and I'm very honored to be a part of that, and I'm happy to have all of you in this movement that we're building, and I thank you for that. So I am 50-50 on whether I'm doing an episode of My Fellow Americans tomorrow, just because my schedule's so crazy. But I may be doing it. I am going to be on Dave Smith's Part of the Problem tomorrow. I don't know if that's live or pre-recorded, but I will be doing it regardless. So it'll either be live or pre-recorded and shown some other time. If it is live, I'll be sharing it on Muddy Waters and on my page as well. And if it's pre-recorded, then once it's up, I'll be sharing it. I'll be doing some other interviews as well. And then on Thursday, I'll be flying out. So then tune in next week, Tuesday, right now, on Muddy Waters Media, for the next episode of the Muddy Waters of Freedom, where Matt Wright and I parse through the week's event like the sweet summer boys that we are. Matt, if someone was trying to find us on the internet with their fingers, is that even possible? And if so, how would they do that?
It would be possible. They wouldn't even have to use their fingers anymore, I don't think. I think that nowadays you can just kind of speak and
wow.
Get there. Yeah, I know. Technology is crazy.
That's fantastic.
It's just wonderful. You can find the sweet, sultry, buttery goodness of our voices.
Hey, everybody.
Streaming to you.
Spike Cohen here.
24 hours a day. 7 days a week.
I got a sign.
At anchor.fm/muddied waters.
Do you like signs?
And while you're there, you can hit the old message button to leave us comments, questions, concerns that we will play live on the air. We'll play most of them live on the air.
That's the sound of a sign.
You can also hit the old donate button so we can continue to bring you this high quality programming that you have come to know and love.
Signs are made out of corrugated plastic, and they make a little noise when you do the thing. So, folks, thanks again for tuning in.
And you can also find this and every other episode at muddywatersmedia.com.
It's ASMW. Huh? Because Muddy Waters?
Yeah.
So, folks, thanks again for tuning in. Have a great night. And where we're going,
we don't need roads.
He didn't just stand up there and give little discourses, and neither do I. Well, it's about time. You still have to confess that meth, confess that meth, confess that meth. Get up. You still have to confess that meth, confess that meth. COVID-19 is a curse. Oh, I'm so sick. Oh, God, I'm so sick. I bet I got COVID. Oh, God, I'm so sick. Well, it's about time. COVID-19 has had it. Glory to God, I don't have it. I don't have it. I never will have it. Will have it. And I don't mind telling you, I'll never be sick again. You still have to confess that meth. Confess that meth. Confess that meth. Get up. You still have to confess that meth. Confess that meth. The devil hates it when believers get money. Most especially
talking about COVID. To be specific, COVID-19. That name gets further and further away from China as opposed to calling it the Chinese virus. Come flu, the Chinese virus. Come flu, the Chinese virus. Don't you understand, you dumb son of a bitch? Calling it come flu, the Chinese virus. Testing is a double-edged sword. They test and they test. People don't know what's going on. We got this, they got this. You do testing, you're gonna find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down. You know what? We got another one over here. The young man's 10 years old. He's got the sniffles. That's a case. That's a case. Thank you, China. Send us the plague. Come flu, the Chinese virus. Come flu, the Chinese virus. Don't you understand, you dumb son of a bitch? Calling it come flu, the Chinese virus. Despite the fact that I have done a phenomenal job. He lied. I saved hundreds of thousands of lives. There was only one person that died. I ran for politics once, but I became president. You are so lucky I'm president. There's a limit to what we can achieve. I stand before you today to declare, come flu, the Chinese virus. Come flu, the Chinese virus. Don't you understand, you dumb son of a bitch? Calling it come flu, the Chinese virus. If I lose an election over that, you know what? This country's in big trouble. Big trouble.
Just open your mouth and let it say whatever it wants to say. Morga dini, namakute, temanese, goropo umalala jegle disto. Nakorob ati lumasama. Morga dini, namakute, temanese, goropo umalala jegle disto. Nakorob ati lumasama. Oh, nagane, hey, oh, malahana. Bakana ba shigler, I just pray that. Is non kumulava stak that's gay. Morgadini, namakute, temanese, goropo umalala jegle disto. Nakorob ati lumasama. Morgadini, namakute, temanese. Goropo umalala jegle disto. Nakorob ati lumasama.